Bob Balder. I'm the Executive Director of the AAP NYC program in Lower Manhattan, and I've been really fortunate that our team in New York City has been able to work with Marjorie, as well as with the Office of Alumni Affairs and Development, to be able to host this event. And this evening we have 4 really accomplished graduates from the City and Regional Planning program, covering both the URS program. We have 3 graduates from URS, as well as also one that did URS and MRP, and then one who just did the MRP degree. So I'm going to give you a nice introduction to each of them, and hopefully my technology will hold up, because it's a little awkward where I am right now. But let's start off with Celeste Frye. Celeste is the CEO and founder of Public Works Partners, a WBE certified urban planning and consulting firm that strengthens organizations and also works very closely with a variety of local communities. She's an expert in designing and implementing multi-stakeholder initiatives and building strong communities connections across governmental, not-for-profit, and private sectors. Blending her experience in planning and organizational management, Celeste helps organizations and communities capitalize on existing strengths and engage stakeholders in redeveloping and creating actionable strategies that are sustainable over time. Celeste speaks and writes on urban topics such as community engagement, equitable economic development, and human-centered design. Celeste holds a master's from, obviously, Cornell, but she did her undergraduate degree at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And she also has been involved in Goldman Sachs' 10,000 Small Businesses, and also the Coro Leadership New York. So welcome, Celeste. Our next panelist is Amy Cates. Amy did her URS degree and her MRP, and she was one of the very first of our pioneering URS candidates back in the mid-1980s under the leadership of Professor Richard Booth. Amy serves as a trusted advisor to business leaders around the world, working with them to assess organizational issues, as well as reshape structures and processes that build the depth of their management capabilities. She's a skilled diagnostician and designer, and helps her clients understand organizational options and implications, and obviously is a critical part of their decision-making organization. In addition to her consultant work, Amy teaches organizational design in a variety of executive education programs, including at Delft University, their School of Business, as well as through Cornell University. She is what we call a rescue partner, resource partner, excuse me, at the Center for Effective Organizations at the Marshall School of Business at UCLA, and is also a member of the I4CP Thought Leadership Consortium. She's also now on the advisory board of the Organizational Design Forum, and a board member of the a fellow of the government, or special fellow for the Singapore government, and was given that assignment in 2018 through this year. In 2018, she also joined the board of Educatel, and it's a nonprofit located, doing work in East Africa. And Amy is also the co-author of multiple books on organizational development, or as I should say, organizational design. And she's also developed a number of standardized materials that are used widely in a variety of corporations. Amy will talk a little bit about her background, but she did start as a city planner in New York City, and also has worked extensively on a variety of issues around New York City, so is very familiar with the context of our program in Lower Manhattan. Our next speaker is Jordan Exantus, URS class of 07, and he's been an urban planner now for 17 years. He has professional experience in both public and private sectors, working in everything from urban planning, park planning, sustainable development, as well as real estate consulting. And Jordan has spent most of his career developing and planning, working on community empowerment plans, as well as a lot of project management in a wide variety of contexts. Jordan began his career in New York City at Gensler Architects, working actually with me when I was there, and went on to work in Minnesota for the Red Lake Band of the Chippewa Indians. So he had a chance to work extensively on issues associated with economic development, energy, as well as long-term planning. He went on to earn his graduate degree at the University of Memphis under Professor Reardon, also former chair of the Department of City and Regional Planning. And during his time in Tennessee, he also worked with the Tennessee Area Association and wrote a number of local working on both housing, economic development, as well as the land use planning. Jordan eventually went on to move to become the Director of Planning and Community Development for the town of Somerville, Tennessee. And in 2014, he moved to Prince George's County to their planning department outside of Washington, D.C., where he is today, where he oversees a variety of park planning functions, capital investments, as well as the development of new recreational programming. Our last and fourth panelist is Antone Bryant. He is both an urban planner and an architect. He is a thought leader specializing in community engagement with over 20 years of experience in design, documentation, engagement, and empowerment. He has worked in both public, private, as well as not-for-profit sector. And Antone is well-versed in the demanding language of both government regulations, standards, having worked extensively with a variety of HUD housing programs, as well as other economic development tools, especially the low-income housing tax credit. And he's also leveraged his experience developing and advocating for underserved communities, where he's been extremely active both in housing, but also in a variety of areas associated with community empowerment. He currently works for, excuse me, I've just got to get my screen up. My light is changing a little bit. Sorry about that. He currently is serves as Product Manager and Director of Business Development for the Houston office of Moody Nolan, a nationally recognized architectural firm headquartered in Columbus, Ohio, which is also the nation's largest design firm under African-American leadership. Nationally, Antone serves on the board of directors of the National Organization of Minority Architects, NOMA, as the director of their strategic partnerships, where he has established relationships and associations with a variety of other architects across the country, all of which are aligned with NOMA's vision. Locally, Antone plays a tremendous role in the growth of the city of Houston, where he's a member of the city's planning commission, also serving as the secretary on the board of directors of the Redevelopment Authority, and he's also the founding member of Elevate Charter School in Houston's 3rd Ward. Antoine, received his Bachelor of Science in Urban and Regional Studies from Cornell, but he also went on to do a Master of Architecture from, from the University of Texas in Austin. So welcome all of our panelists. Let's shift over. I'm going to open up our first question of the evening. These are questions that were submitted previously by our participants in tonight's call. And let me open up with that question. I'm hearing a little bit of static in the background. So the question for all four of you, what are the top 3 skills you think every planning student should leave Cornell with? And also, the second part of the question is it important to start one's planning career with technical expertise, or did you gain these skills on the job? Yeah, sorry for the delay here. Marjorie, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So, sorry, Bob, could you just say that
Okay, why don't we start off, yeah, sorry about that. little bit of noise around me.
I can, if you want, Bob, I can ask that question.
Yes, please. Yeah, sorry, my connection. I'm going to try to move to a better spot.
No, that's okay. And I think, and if you're not speaking, if you don't mind, make sure that your mic is muted. So, because there are a lot of people on here, so there's a lot of background noise. Okay, so the question is, what are the top 3 skills you think every planning student should leave grad school with? And then the second part of that question is it important to start one's planning career with technical expertise, or did you gain these skills on the job? And Celeste, let's start with you.
Because I've already unmuted.
Put you on the hot spot.
You know, this is a really interesting question, particularly the second half, because I remember when I got to Cornell, I had come to CRP from the Peace Corps. And my undergrad degree was in geography, which you would think is like a great prep for urban planning. But I didn't even really know what urban planning was. But here I was at CRP, and I hesitate to say this, but one of the beautiful things about CRP, and one of the reasons I came, was because there was so much flexibility. You could really shape the experience that you wanted to have. One of the downsides to that is that I somehow became an urban planner without ever having taken a zoning class, like didn't know zoning. So I would say, yes, you can do urban planning without having a lot of technical skills. You learn a lot of the technical stuff on the job. I also didn't study GIS at all, which was a little more normal in the mid-90s. I think it would be completely bonkers now not to have some of those skills. But I think that a lot of the technical skills you learn on the job. I think that the crucial skills that you need to learn at CRP are critical thinking, you know, the ability to look at a situation and develop ideas for how to solve challenges and think outside of the box. You know, for me, the wonderful thing about urban planning is that it helps us bring an equity lens, it helps us bring a spatial lens, and it helps us bring a critical lens to all the problems that our cities and towns face. And it just helps us think about things in different ways. So to me, those are the crucial skills that you need to gain in your planning education. And the technical skills are important, and you're gonna get some of them, right? Like I got a lot of skills around economics and economic development, but other technical skills you can fill in on the job. Marjorie, you're muted, so I'm gonna popcorn it over to Jordan.
Thank you, Celeste, thank you.
All right. Thank you. I think I could probably echo some of that. You know, what really appealed to me about planning was the fact that they told us that this was this epistemological field of study. And I always gravitated to that fact because I always found specialization to be a little bit strange. I wanted to understand the interconnectedness of all things and how they work and how they coexist and how those different things impact each other. So, you know, when I was growing up, my dad always told me, add as many tools to the bag as possible. So, you know, I did everything from GIS to, you know, drafting classes to, you know, courses in far reaches of campus, just because I wanted to, you know, gain as many tools as I could, so to speak. But ultimately, you know, it was also, you know, being a young person in school, it's about finding your passion. It's about, you know, learning as, you know, things in a vein along your personal interests and learning how planning theory applies to those things and helping you understand the way the world works in a way that you feel empowered to do something to change it. And ultimately, that was, you know, my mission during school. I was very, you know, had a solid foundation and belief based on my experiences growing up as a, you know, person of color in this country. You know, and I wanted to do something to, you know, change the world, to leave a legacy, so to speak. And, you know, for me, planning really enabled me to touch a lot of things. And when I did finally enter the job market, I understood I had enough skills to have the confidence to say I can do that. And then if tasked with that job, I could figure it out as I went, and learn those skills on the job.
Great. Oh, thank you, Jordan. Thank you. We'll hand over.
Marjorie, I think you cut out a second.
Amy, you can, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, just as you were saying the name, I couldn't hear. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see everyone. And I graduated URS in the first class of URS, 86. I got my MRP in 87. Professor Forrester was my professor and probably the most important professor that I had in my 5 years at Cornell. And I'm so excited to see him here today. I'm going to talk to you. Let me just set the perspective I'm going to talk to you, because, you know, when I graduated in 87, that was the market crash. I've been through 4 economic downturns since then. So, but my personal experience really isn't relevant to you. So what I want to come to you with is my perspective of someone who's had a firm, which we just sold to Accenture, and I'm now managing director at Accenture, and I receive probably every week emails or LinkedIn from young people asking for advice or career, you know, counseling. So I would give my perspective during this hour from the one kind of on the receiving end of inquiries about jobs and careers and mentoring and support. And my second perspective is as the mother of a 21-year-old and a 24-year-old. One is a Cornell grad, who, like you, have been incredibly successful all through their lives. You wouldn't be at Cornell if you weren't, and now finding themselves in a place where the world doesn't seem like a very friendly kind of environment. And in fact, for the first time, you know, they looking for jobs and people don't even bother to answer. So when I think about when I coach my own kids and when I give advice to those people who reach out to me, and I think about my 5 years at my time at Cornell and my 5 years at the Department of City Planning before going into org design, the 3 things that I've learned that I have used all of the time are number one, understanding systems. Understanding the complexity of multi-layered systems, whether they are in the urban environment, in the political environment, social, you know, economic, organization environments. So many people look through a lens of individual or maybe team and really miss the impact of systems. Number 2, related to that, and this I learned from Professor Forrester and have carried it with me for the last literally 35 years, is understanding power dynamics. There is no system and there is no environment in which there is not power at play. And if you are unaware of that and uncomfortable with that, or choose to avoid that there is power at play, then you are not going to be able to function, whether in your own professional life or really having influence or impact on actually making change, which is the work that we do. And the third thing is slightly different, and I would say relationship building. You hear people say network, network, network. Authentic, sincere relationship building that is built on mutual give and take of support, trust, and expertise, and building those relationships. I have relationships from literally 30 years ago that pay off, that show up today, right, in my professional world, and are make a difference in my life professionally and personally. So those would be the 3 things. And for technical, look, I do a job now that I couldn't have studied for when I was at Cornell. Organization design didn't exist. So I wouldn't worry about the technical. I would worry about critical thinking, relationship and personal skills, and being a learner, a fast learner in any environment you find yourself in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. Antoine, you want to close that out?
There's a lot to go with. Our team here has answered a lot of these questions, so I'll try to make it brief. When I think of the 3 things that could help, many of them were touched on. I think you learn when I took the undergrad route, right? So I did urban planning as an undergrad with the URS degree. And then even though my grad was in architecture, I took some planning courses and MRP in Texas. You have to learn to listen, right? Especially if you're going to be involved in any sort of community work and any sort of engagement work, you have to learn to be able to listen to the community and residents that you're dealing with. I think sometimes as academics, even as professionals, we got the idea already figured out. And when you go into any sort of one of these settings and do more talking than listening, people shut down and they already will discount any of your efforts moving forward. That's one thing you have to be very, very careful and intentional about. I think there's a real value in your historical analysis and knowledge. You know, one of the things that I learned when I was, you know, everyone's been touting the work of Richard Rothstein and the Color of Law, which in and of itself is a fantastic book. But what, you know, a lot of that I learned while I was at Cornell in the early 90s, about how cities were formed, about how many of our cities were formed through, quite frankly, de jure segregation. And, you know, the way our cities are formed right now, and even today, were due to regulations that were put in by our local and our federal governments. You know, the way our highways were put in, the way our housing projects were put in, all had different motives behind them. And when you understand that, it helps you as a planner, quite frankly, and how you're able to navigate and put things in place for the communities that you're going to be serving. And then the last thing that I learned a bit while I was at Cornell, but I definitely was inculcated in with after school, was you have to be able to navigate politics. If you're going to be doing planning work, especially at the municipal level or as a consultant, you have to be intimately aware of the other things at play in that community. You know, it's a skill, quite frankly, but it is something that you have to learn how to know who your state senator and your state representative are for that area. You know, be able to be conversant with your city council people or your aldermen or what have that case may be. And you'll be amazed at how much authority that you can begin to assume just by being in the right place after a while. And what I found is that helps you to very quickly become an authority and ideally be able to help set the direction for many communities that we serve. And I think it's incumbent upon us to try to do that as much as possible. Lastly, on this technical thing, I think you should either go one way or go all the way the other, right? And what I mean by that is, if you are really, really technical, then jump all the way in, because people like myself will hire you because I don't want to do that crap anymore, right? I tell you, I'll be honest with you, you know, I just like Amy, you know, I took GIS in like 91, 92, and I got really good at it, and then I ain't touch it in about 10 years, and I don't want to touch it no more, but I still need it, and so I hire people that do it all the time. But on the flip side of it, if it's not where you are, or if you think you don't have an affinity for it, then it's incumbent upon you to be really, really good on the other end of the spectrum, right? If you're not going to be a technical person, you really, really need to enhance your communication skills. If you're able to communicate effectively, you will always have a place. And I think I cannot overstate that. If you're able to really communicate a message and hear from people, there will always be a place for you. I can guarantee you that.
Hey, Bob, you're muted, Bob.
Okay, how's that?
Oh, perfect. Great.
There we go. Finally, we'll see if we get the technology worked out. I apologize. So I've shifted over a couple of tools here, so hopefully this works. But let's go on. I have another question for each of you, and it really is building on this idea that all of you have moved around and done so many different things that the question that we have from one of the students is, I'm curious about career pivots or moments when you decided to take on new kinds of ventures and or projects. And the question really is, what formulated, what actually motivated you to make a career shift? And you know, what kind of questions were you asking yourself that were particularly helpful in guiding you to that next chapter of your professional career? And we'll start off, let's pass it back. Celeste, let me start off with you.
Thanks, Bob. So it's a great question. I'll focus on my planning career. So I had a short career, at least largely in public health, actually, before I went to planning school after finishing undergrad. But I'll focus on my planning career. When I left CRP, I came to New York City and worked in New York City government for 5 years in a couple of different agencies. And then I made the leap, that really probably the biggest pivot of my career. I made the leap from the public sector to consulting. I actually was an independent consultant for the first few years, and then formed a firm. And it was only now about 4 years ago, within the last 4 years, that our firm actually started growing an urban planning practice. So we had largely been a management consultancy, more similar to Amy's work, really. And I think that the big career pivots, so, I'll speak to starting to do urban planning again after kind of a break from it, largely doing sort of like policy and more management work. I saw a gap in the market. New York City has a real dearth of urban planning firms. Many of them were either folded or were bought up by large engineering firms after the 2008 economic crisis. And so there was a real need actually for small firms, for minority and women-owned firms, and for firms who were ready to be kind of willing, nimble, and do community engagement work. I don't know how many of you know a lot of engineers and architects, no offense, Antoine, but they don't actually often like to talk to people in the community. But as urban planners, that's what we're trained to do, right? And we can bring some really great tools to do that. And as Antoine said, to listen to people, that's part of our toolbox. And so it's been really exciting for me to build back out this part of my practice and this part of our firm now. And I'm finding that, there is a huge need for it. But in terms of why, I think Amy mentioned learning and just an insatiable curiosity. My guess is for many of you, that's what drew you to urban planning, is just a never-ending curiosity and desire to learn. And I think I've just kept following that through the years. And sometimes it makes you take kind of a hard left or a hard right. And it's best to follow that. And I heard Jordan say some similar things in our prep meeting the other night. So I'll throw it back out to the rest of the group.
That's great. Well, hey, why don't we throw it over to you, Jordan? I know you've made a number of really significant moves in your professional career, and love to hear a little bit more about how you made those determinations, and obviously have done that really successfully.
Yeah. So I guess I was one of those unfortunate individuals to graduate undergrad right before the recession hit. But really, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise for me, because I think, at 21, you don't really know what exactly you want to do. I picked my career based on, what I thought was a cool firm and a city I thought I wanted to live in, and found out pretty quickly that while I gained a lot of important skills working there, it wasn't really in line with my core passions as someone who wanted to be involved in community development work, that really wanted to be working to empower disenfranchised communities and things of that nature. And I was laid off during the recession, which I think was really one of my greatest gifts professionally, because, I learned that I could land on my feet, and I never really feared work environments ever again after that. When during the recession, which it may be a little bit similar to how things are now, I'm not sure, but work was a little scarce. People were anxious on the job, and working could be difficult. But I did a complete 180, and I had a friend, and it's interesting. One of the previous speaker mentioned personal relationships. Almost every job that I've had happened because of a conversation with a friend or a colleague or a classmate or somebody that I developed a personal relationship with, and those mutual energies just coalesce into something, and that's really served me throughout my career. So I can't stress that enough. But, you know, when I was recently unemployed in New York City, I had a friend who was the first person from his tribe ever to get a planning degree. He's from American Indian guy. And he was out there on the reservation working by himself. And he said, hey, man, I need help. You know, he's like, we can write some grants. We can get you out here. We can figure it out. You know, I'd never been on an Indian reservation. You know, it was way out in rural Minnesota. It's cold. It's a teeny tiny market. You know, it's only 10,000 people that live up there. But I said, hey, you know, this could be a great opportunity. And I just took that risk to go outside my comfort zone and try something different. And, you know, ever since I made that choice, I try to preach to young people the allure of the small market, because when I was in New York, I was at the bottom of the pecking order. I was doing Bob's notes, you know what I mean? I was just doing, you know, little tasks. And, you know, I moved to the reservation, and over the span of 3 years, I was involved in $14 million worth of work. And I was trusted to be a professional, to be an expert, and I had to figure it out on the fly. And it really helped me grow as a professional in terms of having the confidence to take on projects, to, you know, work with some of these big state and federal programs, to go after money and manage those projects, and realize that, you know, all these things are possible even in some of the most difficult environments. I won't get into the politics at play in that job, but it can be challenging as a planner. And I'll echo the other speakers' comments. Politics always comes into play, and, you know, nothing's ever easy or straightforward. But I think if you have that mindset of, you know, being willing to go outside your comfort zone, you know, I always go back to that whole thing about understanding where you are. Survey before you plan. You know, like, you have to understand where you are, understand the culture, understand the people, and show respect. And, you know, you can, you know, understand your role as helping them get to where they're going, as opposed to imposing your ideas. And people will embrace you, and every win that you have, they'll celebrate with you along the way. You know, the majority of my career pivots after that had to do with life circumstances, you know, having a family, you know, moving for grad school, and things of that nature. But again, every time it was really motivated and made empowered by those relationships. You know, I went to grad school where there was, you know, an old Cornell planning professor that I knew well, and he was able to not only get me situated, but also help my partner find a job. So it just kind of works out when you know, you stay in touch with people, you develop those relationships, and you're able to find opportunities a little bit easier. And the last thing I would say is just, you know, having hunger and hustle. You know, I've helped people. You know, I try to, you know, be a mentor to different alumni, and you know, I can think in particular, I had this one young woman I was trying to help get a job, and I was preparing her, and she came, and it was like, you know, the attitude was kind of like, you know, I don't know if I really want to work here. And it's like, you need a job, right? You know, and then this other girl came in, and she was like, I'll work for free if you need me to. And it was like, we're hiring her right off the bat, right? And it's like, sometimes you just got to get a job and then figure out what you want to do from there. And then that same girl spent 6, 8, 10 months just not working. So I think key to dealing with transition is just, you know, being able to strike when there's an opportunity, and then you can kind of figure it out from there.
Wow, that's great. Let me throw it over to Amy.
So I love Jordan's example there, and it's similar to my experience. You know, after my MRP degree, I landed the dream job. I was selected as an urban fellow in the city of New York, and then I worked 5 years for the Manhattan Office of City Planning. And you know what? I wasn't happy. It was a recession. There wasn't work to go on. There was a mayoral election. I wasn't learning. I was sitting at my desk. And during that time in my office building, I met a woman who had just left Citibank and was starting a small consulting firm out of her bedroom. And I started doing some part-time work. And then one day I left the job at City Planning and I joined her. And people thought I was crazy. They're like, what, you're gonna go work for somebody like who's starting a, you know, something out of her, and you're working in, you know, in her one-bedroom apartment, and you can't even really explain what it is. And what I've learned, and what has always served me, is forget the fanciness of the organization, forget the title of the job, forget the status that comes up with it, because that's what I chased on the first job. Follow people, where you can learn, and what's the work you're going to do. And I think that example of Jordan gave of where if you can be in an opportunity where you're being stretched and you have a little more responsibility than you even feel comfortable, and you're learning, and there are people around you that you can learn from, that's the best job. And so, you know, I went to work for her as her office manager while I learned org development, and you know, sort of ended up here after time. And just very recent example is, as I mentioned, my older son has a master's degree. He was looking for a new job, and he's gotten very interested in urban agriculture and such. And he found a job a couple of weeks ago with a guy in Brooklyn who has a small firm, and he does gardening in Brooklyn for people who have homes or in front of buildings and such. And what I said, when you go to talk to him, look at, is this somebody who's smart and you can learn from? And what are you going to learn? You want to learn about plants, but also you want to learn about business. Is he going to give you responsibility? Is he going to let you learn from him? And how does he see what he needs in the future? So what I'm saying here is the questions you ask, get beyond all of the stuff that's in the job description and the name on the door, and really look at what 2 years from now, what can I get out of this experience? Because if you get something out, you will put your best in. I don't worry about that.
Right, right. Amy, thank you. Antoine, let me throw the mic over to you.
Sure. No, I think this is a great question. But what I want us to consider is, I think a lot of this really does depend upon, quote unquote, where you are in life. You know, the pivots that I did when I was 24 and 25 and single or recently married were much different than the ones that I did with, you know, 2 kids and a wife, right? And I've had a series of pivots in my career. And the reason I say that is that there are certain, you know, if you are productive in your career and you've got a Cornell degree, it opens a lot of doors, and you will get inquiries throughout your professional life. And sometimes a great opportunity may be at the wrong time, right? And so you have to be very, very cognizant of that. When Detroit was going through a lot of its resurgence and Maurice Cox was over there putting together a whole department, you know, I got a call, and I know Maurice fairly well. And he was like, he's putting together this like all-star team of people. And he was like, hey, you know, I'd love to have you in Detroit. And I'm like, well, that'd be great, be exciting, let's help. And then I was like, well, it's terrible and cold and has a crummy public school system, right? And so that's what I was thinking about. I was like, I would love to go. It'd be awesome. If I was 30 or 35, in a heartbeat, I'd have been out there and been part of the team and would have been excited about it. But I can't stand the cold. I've lost my Ithaca sheen, as it were, and maybe I've been spoiled in Houston, Texas too long. But more than that, you know, I had 2 kids, and their public school system is pretty terrible and has been terrible for a long time. And I just did not want to pay $25,000 a year for 6th grade. So, you know, I had to think about those kinds of things, right? I had to think about it. Then I think about the fact that when I was finishing up grad school, and I was like, do I do architecture? Do I want to do planning? I interviewed with a number of the big firms. I looked at some of the planning opportunities, and I wound up literally making my own position at a nationally recognized nonprofit in Houston. It's called Project Row Houses, and I was working right on the ground floor with this award-winning arts and cultural organization for 4 years. And I never forget when I was being interviewed, they didn't really have a position. They were like, you know, we need to start this CDC, this Community Development Corporation, but we're all artists and we've never actually done any physical development, and we don't know how to work this out, but we like your resume, and someone said we should talk to you. And I was like, yeah, I like you guys too. This is great. We're making a difference. We're in Houston and we're right in the middle of the community. And they were like, what do you want to call yourself? And I said, I don't know. Let's be project manager. And so they said, you're project manager. I was like, okay, great. And then, you know, we bandied about a salary, and then we were off to the races, right? And I wound up being the executive director 2 years later of that organization. And so I think that you have the ability and availability to pivoting off what Amy was saying, you know, you really want to go to a place where you're able to learn and you're able to grow, but it really does, you have to be very sensitive to where you are in life. I think that sometimes we try to compartmentalize our professional lives and our personal lives, and I think that's a mistake. I think you really do have to think about where you are personally and professionally and how that ties into either the family you have or the family you may be thinking of wanting to have later on.
That's great. That's great. Well, hey, let's shift the conversation just a little bit to kind of some of the immediate concerns that some of the students on the call have. And the question that came in is, what should I be doing differently now that we're searching for a job in the middle of a major pandemic and obviously economic stress and recession, but also social unrest and the need to also maybe revisit some of our values and some of the things that we want to commit our time to. So maybe there's a way for us to share a little bit from each of you about how, if we were graduating today, how we might actually try and approach this current job market, and maybe where we might see a few different opportunities that maybe broaden the lens of our search and maybe give us a little bit more optimism as we start to try and work our way to launch our career. And I'll throw that back over to Celeste.
Sure. So I'm going to take this in just a little bit of a different direction. So and get back to what you
Sure.
all are asking. So I mentioned earlier that there's not a lot of planning firms in New York City where I am. Like, this is the market where I am, right? The tri-state area. It's a big market, obviously. But in other places, you know, in Ohio and a lot of other states, there are planning firms, right? But here, if you want to come to the New York City area, you're going to be looking at architecture firms and engineering firms. A lot of the firms are huge international firms, like 100,000 people. It's hard to break into these firms. They have planners, they have whole planning divisions. And a lot of them right now, I'll be totally honest, are not hiring. There's hiring freezes. There's hiring freezes across New York City government. There's hiring freezes across most of these firms. A lot of us, you know, my own small firm of 15 people, we've had 5 projects get frozen in the last 3 months. That's a chunk of our work it'll probably come back. But I would say that what I think we'll see in the next couple months, as we've now crossed into a new fiscal year, at least for the city and for a lot of entities as of July 1st, I think we'll see a stimulus package. God, I hope so. Another stimulus package passed by the end of the year with state and local government relief, and that will start things moving again. You know, I'm seeing some big infrastructure projects moving again. So I say that only to say, you know, this is not y'all, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with you that you're not getting people responding to your jobs. I canceled 2 hires that I was planning in March. It was really painful. I had to cancel my own internship program, and I haven't restarted it. I'm hoping to restart it in the fall. It sucks. I've never not had graduate interns. It's really an important part of my practice. But I'm saying that to say, like, this is everybody, right? So I think what's important, and what I'm seeing, you know, intrepid folks do with me and with other firms like me, is just like, use your Cornell connections, you know, mine, LinkedIn, talk to Marjorie, find alumni, and just ask people for 30 minutes of their time. What I always want people to do is to send me a nice email with their resume attached as a PDF, preferably a 1-page resume, unless you're like 35, like you better be able to fit it on 1 page, or maybe even just your LinkedIn profile, and send me like 2 or 3 times that you're offering to get together with me, because I don't want to have to go through my calendar and find times. It's so hard. So like, just go out there. You know, I'll have a call with you. I may not be able to offer you much right now, but I may be able to offer you someone else you could talk to. And then a couple months from now, when we're ready to start hiring again, because I got a lot of proposals out on the street right now, then I'll have your resume in my inbox, which will be helpful. And that's true of everyone, I think.
Great. Celeste, thank you. Really, really constructive and helpful. Let's, Jordan, let's pick it up over to you in the DC metro area.
So yeah, I have I guess a little different perspective because I'm more on the public sector side. We've actually brought people on board during COVID time. And because I work in Parks and Rec, things are moving. You know, we're seeing a lot of use of our facilities and a lot of demand on our resources. So, you know, I guess I would liken that to is use those, you know, planning ideas, the systems that are, you know, moving in your brain to understand where we're moving and what that might be. You know, I think about like the stock market, right? Like a lot of things collapsed when COVID hit, but a lot of things are going up, right? We see this advanced digitization of society. We're all of a sudden we're using Zoom and all these companies are starting to come to the fore where they're like becoming more relevant. So, you know, we know that some of these things were coming already, but now things are changing. So how to be on the forefront of the wave, how to speak the language to, you know, be able to make yourself indispensable. That's something that, you know, I think about with these times. But, you know, I think it's really just putting yourself out there, you know, informational interviews, all those things of that nature, you know, being willing to, you know, just help out on things. There's things happening right now. You know, I have a friend with no planning background who got involved in some activism back home, and all of a sudden they're spinning this effort into what sounds like the birth point of a CDC. You know, they've got tens of thousands of dollars of donations to start doing community development work. And it's just something that was born out of the emotion of the time. And they just started a movement. And I think the biggest thing with times like these is to just, you know, don't waste the time. You know, if you're a creator, create, you know, keep, you know, doing your thing and creating, you know, resources for yourself to showcase your talents and you know, continue to, you know, get yourself out there. Because I know for me personally, this time has been a blessing because it's like I'm not spending as much time doing things running around. I'm able to focus more inward on personal development, you know, learning new things, you know, getting new credentials, you know, whatever the case may be. If you're interested in sustainability, go for a credential. If you want to learn project management, there's so many different things out there that you could be doing to put yourself in a better position when the market does pick back up. And then when you go to those job interviews and they say, oh, well, what were you doing? You be like, hey, during this time I was, you know, knocking out this, that, and the third. Now I have this credential. I'm trying to, you know, make my way. And it shows that initiative and drive that, you know, people want to see. So yeah, just try to stay busy and keep your head above the fray and, you know, stay as positive as possible and just keep, you know, stay hungry. And I think, you know, that should serve you well.
Yeah. It really takes a mental toughness, doesn't it, to kind of keep your head in the game and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's shift over. Amy?
Very briefly, this is where I think it is really tough, especially if, you know, you've kind of been going through life program to program and things have gone along and you hit this. I want to underscore both what Jordan and Celeste said. Again, I'm the receiver of a lot of inquiries about mentorship jobs. You know, hey, I see you work at Accenture. Can you look? Number one, do some research before you reach out. Right? Look at the person's website, learn about them, read something that they've written, come with some insightful, informed view on what they do, and ask a good question. You know, I have hired people who have reached out cold to me because they've made an impression. And I'm always very polite and I always respond to anybody who responds. But I won't spend time talking to somebody who just sends a generic, I'm interested in working at Accenture, I'm interested in organization design, I'm interested in Kate's Kessler, can I talk to you? Right? I don't have that time. But someone who asks, who has actually done some work and has something interesting to say, I'd love to have a talk with, and I mentor lots of young folks and have helped them. And that point that Celeste makes of just, it can help to just move them along, right? To make connections with someone else you never know. And so it is not fun to put yourself out there, but as a consultant, I can tell you, I have to sell myself every single day. I have to sell myself to clients, to partners in the ecosystem. I have to prove every day that, you know, and talk about why we're better than someone else. And so get used to it. That's how it is. No one's going to come and find you. And I see Celeste smiling because she has to do that also. And you know, so, and to Jordan's point, don't waste a good crisis. It is, I've been through the 1987 crisis, 9/11, 2008, now this one. Every time there has been a renewal, a rebirth in different sectors, not everybody is benefited, but there are people who are making things happen, who are inventing, innovating, finding the niches that are out there. And again, find the people who are doing interesting things, reach out to them, offer to be helpful, and be interested. Honestly, being interested in other people, being curious is the most flattering thing in the world. And you'll get a response.
Absolutely. Yeah, Amy, I think it's so true. I think a lot of times students don't do enough research, and obviously below the whole discussion, don't even get started because they've really not really educated themselves on what's going on and what they should be prepared to, you know, ask someone for, especially if you're giving your personal time. It's really important that you come really well prepared. But let me pass it over to Antoine.
Well, I'm going to jump on both of those. First of all, in 2020, you have no excuse to not know about everybody you're trying to talk to, right? I mean, I you know, damn it, I was in school in the 90s. We ain't had the internet, so we couldn't find out people, all their business, all that kind of stuff like you can. You can find out, I can find out everything about Bob Boulder if I wanted to in about 20 minutes. And so that's what everybody has that availability. We didn't have LinkedIn, damn it. You know, we barely had the interwebs, you know, because then Al Gore discovered it and we became much more, you know, connected. But, you know, I'm you know, trying to bring a little levity here. I appreciate, you know, when we were coming out of school, everybody was in networking, and that was the term at the time. And then now it's pivoting to connecting, and it's a different methodology to thinking, because I can meet someone tomorrow who I think is a great individual. I can't place them, but Celeste might need somebody. And so what I'll do is I'll call Celeste, and I was like, look, I just heard from this young man named Jordan. He's outstanding. I really think you should give him a look. And then boom, Celeste calls Jordan, and she might, you know, actually bring that person on. So when you're talking to me, you're not just talking to me, you're also talking to Celeste or to Amy or to Jordan or somebody else. And so that value of connecting, we really need to look at how important that is. Additionally, with LinkedIn and with the resumes, I cannot tell you, LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool that I think people sometimes underutilize. If you really put some time into your LinkedIn profile, it can work wonders for you. That's one of the first places I've gone to actually look for talent. You know, I've literally shamelessly trolled on LinkedIn looking for people at various levels, all the way from recent grads to mid-career people, my own age and older, to find really good talent, but also to find out, okay, who are they connected to? Because I probably know someone they're connected to, and then I'll ask that person. And so you'd be surprised how valuable your presence, your social media presence, your professional presence really can be. And so LinkedIn's a tool that you can beef up you can give as much information as possible that talks about your career right there. And it often is the initial gateway. And then thirdly, to kind of elaborate on what Amy talked about, I cannot overstate how valuable it is to know who you're talking to. And it's a game changer. I mean, there's been some times when someone was great on paper, but they gave me a stock kind of introduction and I just crossed them out. And I remember, I'll never forget this young man. He wasn't the best candidate on paper, but then I brought him in for an interview, and we had 5 interviews. And this guy, it was fascinating actually. He knew about my wife's business. He knew about Cornell and University of Texas. He knew about some other project I did at Project Row Houses. And we talked about all that stuff. I'm like, well, you know what? I likes this guy. I likes this guy because he made the intentional effort to really get to understand who he's wanted to work with. And, you know, it's not just, I heard, I want to work for your firm is awesome. Like, no, he really took the time out to kind of dive in. And we hired him for the summer. He was outstanding. And then I referred him to 2 other people, right? I'll write a recommendation for that young man for the next 15 years because of the impression that he made. And I think that goes a long way towards not only establishing your professional career, but also just establishing relationships that you're going to need as you progress.
That's great. That's great. I know we're a little bit over time. Can I throw one last question at everyone? Can we stick around just for a few more minutes? Great.
Thanks, Bob. It's all good.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good. Great. Well, I think this is one that, you know, came in that also deals a little bit with some of the current students that may be on the line. And it really deals with the idea of when it comes to the curriculum that you were taught in both URS and MRP, what classes and our topics are extremely relevant to your day-to-day work today? So I'll bring that back because this is really definitely one of those things, like what were some of those really powerful lessons of Cornell that really did help manifest and really help maybe change and maybe even influence what you're exactly doing today? And I think, Celeste, you touched on a little bit of that earlier. Let's see if there's a little bit more there.
Right. I mean, yeah, Jordan might be able to answer this better because it's been a while since, I mean, I've been out of Cornell for almost 20 years. So the classes have changed a lot. The professors have changed a lot. I mean, I have to say anything John Forrester taught, right? Though I'd also have to say, you know, I did not know how to use Excel or do, you know, basic economic analysis like input-output analysis and stuff like that. And I learned all of that at Cornell. And, you know, sitting in, I don't even know if it still exists, what was then Getty's lab was, yeah, sitting in that computer lab and learning how to use Excel and learning how to do pivot tables and all that stuff. Like literally, if I cannot hire someone who doesn't already have some pretty good Excel skills and database skills just for like basic analysis, you know, because the other stuff, the content stuff I can teach you, but you know, knowing how, and then there's so much more really since then. You know, I would say the other thing, again, and this is agnostic to any one particular class, but it was really learning how to do research. You know, I started that in my undergrad, but I learned so much more in graduate school about how to do proper research. And that's incredibly important to this day in my professional life.
That's great. That's great. Jordan, I'll have you as the young ringer here, you know?
Yeah. So I think mine is maybe a little different than what some students may experience, but I think for me, the root of it is really about gaining that base of knowledge to understand how to think and operate like a planner. You know, I was really swept off my feet when I came to planning school because I was like, oh, these people are like kind of like me, like I'm not crazy, you know, and it just kind of all made sense, you know, because the theory matches with what I saw happening in society. But as we know, a lot of things that aren't spoken on or are taboo, or maybe the proverbial elephant in the room, they were at the forefront of the conversation about why things were the way they are and how to do effective work. You know, they talked about, you know, from back in the days, you know, how the issues in the tenements, you know, in the slums and how that created these social movements and things happen and why we have town hall meetings and all that stuff is born out of, you know, human struggle. And, you know, that's very familiar to me. So what I found in my professional career is that the majority of people that you interface with don't really understand planning theory and why it's necessary. Even when I came to the planning department here in Prince George's County, you know, I would hear comments, people say, you know, why are you guys doing those community meetings? Why are you feeding people? And I'm looking at them like, are you a planner? Like, what kind of, you know, what are you talking about? You know, and it's interesting because my foundation in planning theory, it really saved me because when I came here, hey, Sorry, I got a visitor. When I came here, I worked for a boss that people thought was really tough. You know, so old school black woman, you know, she had driven away lots of people hold on a sec. And, you know, I understood that she was a real advocacy planner, right? It was like, we're going to do this from the ground up. We're going to do community meetings. We're going to make those relationships with the council members. We're going to do this. Everybody pretty much in the organization was against the work we were doing because it was implementation work. They kept saying, oh, we don't do that. We're just planners. You know, we're not trying to actually do real projects. And we said, no, we're going to do it. Because we did a grassroots planning process, where we empowered the community, where we engaged the elected officials and all the other key stakeholders. We created such a powerful momentum behind an idea that we were able to create something in the face of power. When people were like, we don't really want to do this, and even our leadership undermined us, we were able to carry it forward because the people wanted it. But we weren't able to really do that unless we understood how to do a real planning process. That means sending, you know, notices, you know, going in the neighborhood and talking to people, going to their community meetings and talking to them, engaging the religious leaders in the community, engaging the homeowners associations, engaging all of this stuff where you really do a real planning process. The next thing you know, it's like this has blossomed into a $60 million project. And everybody wants a piece of it. And it's really validating because you understand, okay, you know, everybody was against you, but you stick to those core values and you can do something good. And I think that's what you really have to take from planning, is that you have to trust it. You know, you can't be swayed by the powers that be, the people that tell you, oh no, we don't need to do that. It's gonna be too much. Oh, if we do another meeting, it's gonna drive up our budget. Oh, we do this and that. No, you know, they try to circumvent the process and it comes back and bites you in the butt. I've seen it time and time again. They do something, people in the community get mad, they come back, and then they gotta bring 15 people in a room to discuss how they're gonna calm down the community. And I'm looking at them like, oh, now you want my advice. Okay, now you want to talk to me. and time again. So just trust that planning theory, you'll be fine.
Great. Wow. Wow. Amy, how about that? You're on the hot seat.
I'm not gonna, we're running over
You
time,
gonna
and I
run?
think Jordan said it perfectly, and it also looks like he's got
Yeah,
someone
he's
who
got
wants him to be doing something else. So I'm gonna just underscore that.
Okay.
Well said.
That's great. Well, Amy, thank you. I know you got to run. I'm going to pass it over to Antoine to give him the last word on this if he's still with us.
I'm still here. I will close it down. I think this was fantastic. I think everything that Jordan and Celeste said previously were really strong. The only thing I would add, I critically used my qualitative and quantitative analysis courses because they allowed me to use data and not only be able to get it, but able to craft a narrative around it. I think one of the things that we're all learning as planners is that, you know, data is the easy part. How you interpret it and then share it with people is really where the rubber meets the road. And anything that we've seen, especially in a 24-hour media cycle right now, is that data can be used a whole bunch of ways. And so it's important and critically important that we're able to display that as effectively as possible. But more than that, I would like to thank all of you for being on this call with us that are recent grads, that are still in grad school, that are still undergrads. You know, congrats to you for listening to a bunch of old people yammer on in the middle of a Thursday evening, right? So definitely kudos to you all. You know, reach out. Would love to share more whenever you guys are available. Thanks to Bob for sitting in a car for 2 hours and you know, making it happen. So kudos to him. And this has been great. So I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Oh, wow, this was great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, we thank you all so much. And especially